This is Jonathan Manthorpe, and I'm speaking to you from my home on Vancouver Island on Canada's Pacific coast. I'm delighted that Midiawatch is publishing a Korean edition of my book, Claws of the Panda, Beijing's Campaign of Influence and Intimidation in Canada. And I would especially like to thank Yewon Hwang for overseeing the translation and production of the book. It has been a pleasure working with him. My book has two main themes. The first is the way the Chinese Communist Party has abused Canada's friendship for its own ends. The second is how and why Canada's political, business and academic elites have allowed and encouraged this to happen. Claws of the Panda is the story of how Canada's leaders deluded themselves into believing that by encouraging political, business and academic connections with the People's Republic of China, they could persuade the CCP to adopt Western civic, democratic and human rights values. Canada's establishment classes have not been alone in their self-delusion about the CCP. The same belief has been pursued by the United States, Australia and New Zealand, as well as several of the countries of Western Europe. Canada's neighbours in Asia, and especially the democracies South Korea, Taiwan and Japan, have been far more careful in developing their relationship with the CCP. They have shown much less confidence that the Communist Party will make serious political, judicial or human rights reforms. My book tells how Canada's delusions about China started in the 1880s, and this is when Chinese people began coming to Canada in search of opportunities, and Canadian missionaries began settling in China, seeking to win converts to Christianity. The Canadians saw being ambassadors for social change in China was just as important as being Christian missionaries. And this is why in the 1940s, Canadian missionaries and diplomats felt themselves more aligned with the Chinese Communist Party than with the ruling Kuomintang, which many judged to be fascist. For their part, the CCP leaders saw this as an opportunity and the beginning of a very useful relationship for the future. Communist Party leaders have continued until very recently to tell Canada's business, political and academic leaders that they have a special relationship and friendship with Canada. The recruitment of these Canadian agents of influence usually involves offers of privileged access to China, and this often means financial benefits, but also appeals to the Canadians' vanity. The campaign has paid off handsomely for the Chinese Communist Party. Since the 1960s, Canada has been a dependable source of food, raw materials, and investment money for the PRC, and in the last 20 years, an important market for manufactured goods. It has also helped the CCP on the international stage. Canada's opening of diplomatic relations with Beijing in 1970 was an example that was quickly followed by dozens of other countries, and by the United States in 1979. This brought Beijing out of isolation and into the international community. From the start, Canada has given the CCP easy access to its technologies and its academic research establishments. The PRC's military and its industries have benefited greatly from this transfer of intellectual property from Canadian laboratories and research facilities, and continue to do so. As CCP senior officials and their families have become extremely wealthy, many have invested in Canadian property and companies. The lack of strict financial regulations and scrutiny in Canada allows the red nobility to keep their assets well hidden here. The CCP has been able to maintain a large espionage network in Canada, mostly run by the United Front Work Department, Beijing's main political warfare organization that China's President Xi Jinping has called his magic weapon. United Front's objective is to exert control over the 1.5 million Canadians who are of ethnic Chinese descent, but most of whom want nothing to do with the CCP. The spy network is also used to intimidate Chinese Canadians who advocate for political change in the PRC, and to attack people of all backgrounds who oppose the CCP. Until 3 years ago, the CCP was able to pursue its campaign in Canada without any significant questioning or opposition by Canadian decision-makers. That began to change on December 1st, 2018, when Canadian immigration officers detained the chief financial officer of Huawei Technologies, Meng Wanzhou. She is wanted in the United States on charges of fraud and of lying to international banks. The immediate response of the CCP was to show its true colors. Its officials kidnapped and are holding hostage 2 Canadians who lived and worked in China, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. They have been detained for 1,000 days while Meng's lawyers use the Canadian courts to try to stop her being extradited to the US. A decision by the Canadian court is expected in the fall. Meanwhile, the 2 Michaels have been tortured, they have been deprived of contact with their relatives, and have been allowed only meagre access to Canadian diplomats. They have even been tried in secret on trumped-up espionage charges. In mid-August, the PRC authorities announced that Michael Spavor has been sentenced to 11 years in prison. A verdict in the case of Michael Kovrig is expected soon. The Huawei affair has destroyed the previously good reputation of the PRC and the CCP in Canada and around the world. The damage is so serious that once the Huawei affair is resolved, it will not be possible for Canada to have normal relations with the PRC for the foreseeable future. As my book shows, a lot of mistakes could have been avoided if the truth about the CCP's objectives had been seen years ago. But I suppose it is better late than never, and I hope my book can help other countries that are also the targets of CCP incursions to respond with more resolve than Canada has shown. Thank you.